Hey everybody, today we're going to be ranking the 10 starter duel decks on their upgrade path to a fully competitive standard deck. Now this isn't everybody's goal, but what's really important is I want to make sure that new and returning and budget players don't spend 20 wildcards on a deck that just doesn't have the longevity that they think it's going to have, and it's not going to bring them much success in the competitive ranks. For the purposes of today's rankings, we're going to call casual decks. Those are going to be decks that are going to be doing well in the bronze and silver tiers. And then the competitive decks are going to be decks that can keep up with gold and above tiers of play, just for our kind of purposes. Again, I don't want to limit anyone's fun. If you find a deck that you think is really fun, it's worthwhile to play that deck. But I don't want anybody who's new to the game to spend a lot of wildcards on something that doesn't have that end game of getting to a competitive state. So with that said, let's start off with Arcane Aerialist, one of my favorite decks in Standard Deck Duel. There are always tempo decks in Standard. There's always some kind of flyer deck in that budget tier of Standard, but there's not a really clear competitive deck. Blue-white is oftentimes a control deck in Standard, and so this type of flyers, like all flyers deck or an angel deck, those type of things that are really popular, they don't have the legs for the competitive metagame. And so this is a deck that can do really well in Standard Deck Duel. It is a deck that can do really well in the bronze and silver tier, but once you get gold and above, this is a deck that's going to struggle. And so while it's fun and I like playing it myself, this is a deck where if we're ranking it for an upgrade path, this is a deck where I'm going to put it as a B. If you are planning on playing these type of strategies, I would lean into the tempo aspect of playing really quick unsummons followed up with a clock, and you're attacking every turn. You can kind of get to 20 points that way, but overall, it's not a really competitive deck to take to a standard environment. The blue-red deck, there's a lot of blue-red in Standard right now, and it shares similar themes, not necessarily the cards themselves, but it shares similar themes of quick creatures that are followed up with removal and card draw spells. This is a deck where, as it is, it's not ready for that prime time competitiveness, but it is also something that is fun to play, and it's something that you can take to bronze and silver tiers, especially with cards like Enigma Drake, these kind of flyers that get really big once you play these instants and sorceries, and then you're playing them and you're winning with 2 or 3 big hits with flyers instead of chipping away for damage. So this, because of the upside of blue-red, I'll also put this in the B tier. Now, Vampiric Hunger, this is the life gain deck. This is probably the most popular deck for new and returning players that's being used in the Standard Deck Duel. This deck has some upgrade ability. There is a budget version of a life gain deck in Standard right now. I would also say that this can lead you down to the path of like an Aristocrats style deck. Aristocrats is a sacrifice theme deck where you're usually playing a lot of small creatures that give you a lot of value. Right now in Standard we have Raise the Past, so that you can get all your 2-drops and below back. And that is still a really fun kind of deck that you could play in Standard. Right now it's getting less than 2% showing, but it's still a deck that is competitive and you can have a lot of fun with. For those reasons, I am going to say out of all of the Standard Duel decks that this is the best deck to upgrade. It has a fine middle ground in that bronze and silver tier where you could just upgrade the deck as far as the specific life gain creatures themselves, and then you can go ahead and take it to the next level with rares and mythics to bring it to this more aristocrat style. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the S tier. This is, in my opinion, the best deck to help to upgrade for if you are planning on playing standard later on. The Boros deck, the red-white deck, there's usually a red-white deck in standard. Sometimes they're only mono red, where they're just getting out as quickly as possible. A number of small creatures backed up by 1 or 2 combat spells or removal or buffs, and are able to deal damage really quickly. There is a red deck in standard right now. It's not really this style. It's more on the Bloomborough cards. So these cards don't necessarily translate to that kind of deck, but the themes do make sense, right? Like if you get used to playing this style of deck, you will be able to transition into a mono red or a Boros deck in the metagame. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in the A category. It has a little bit more legs than some of the others. Cat Attack, we're going to kind of think of as the same as the Boros deck. This is a go wide strategy, number of small creatures. There is a white tokens deck on the budget side of standard, although it doesn't get a lot of play. I do think of this more of a red-white aggro deck with a lot of small creatures, so we're going to follow suit and put this in the A category. Lots of aggro decks all in a row here. This is the Reckless Raid deck, where you are attacking every single turn, much like the mono red decks that are in standard. They have had some bans in the last ban cycle about a month ago, and so they have definitely been taken down a peg, but they are a staple of standard. And when you get into this mono red aggressive attacking every turn kind of play style, this is a deck that is always around. For that reason, I think there's a little bit more longevity in this deck, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in the S tier as well. The Graveyard Gifts deck. There is some Reanimator decks in standard. They tend to be a little bit less played. They're not in the forefront of the metagame, but there are a couple of decks that will put huge creatures into the graveyard and then be able to bring them back out with Zombify. For that reason, I can't put it too low on the list, but those decks tend to be 3 and 4 colors. And so while they're a budget deck in that they don't have a lot of rares, they would take a lot of wild cards, and then also you would really need an expansive mana base to be able to play 3, 4, even 5 colors on those graveyard decks. So that's one limitation that I see. I'm going to have to put it in the B category because of that limitation, but it is a fun deck and something that's definitely worth trying. Path to Power is your normal Stompy deck, big creatures. It has the red for some removal spells that can get little creatures off the battlefield. It doesn't have a huge ceiling. It doesn't really have a place in competitive standard. Most of the time, red aggressive decks are on the smaller side so that they can come out a lot faster. The green Stompy decks do really well in bronze and silver tier play, but not so much once you get above that. So for that reason, I am going to have to put them in the C category. Morbid would be the same kind of mid-range decks. These Stompy decks that are a little bit slower. Stompy is usually referred to red, green, and the green black is usually a little bit more value oriented, whether that's making up value from cards that are in the graveyard. They're a little bit more on the mid-range value deck. there's always a mid-range deck in Standard, and so this deck is never too far out of style, but these specific cards don't lend themselves to a deck that's in Standard right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the C tier category. And the last is the blue-green deck. Blue-green is is a very popular deck, and for brewers that like to kind of build their own deck, there's always a budget Standard deck in blue-green that is looking to ramp out a big creature. This deck specifically is more on landfall, and right now there is one budget Standard deck that uses a lot of landfall triggers, but the theme is a little bit off, even though it's kind of related. This deck can certainly hold up in bronze and silver tier play, but as the strategy of this deck, it's not really suited for competitive Standard. Although, if you take this deck a little bit more broadly and you're looking into ramp followed by huge splashy, whether it's creatures or non-creature permanents, that's always has a home in Standard. So we'll go ahead and rank that over in the B tier. So wrapping up this list, if you are looking for starter decks that have the opportunity to transform themselves into more competitive Standard decks, the two that I would be looking at are the black-white life gain deck that you move through the life gain and get towards more of the Aristocrats style sacrifice deck later on in your kind of Standard journey, and the Rakdos deck where you really make this into a mono red aggressive deck that is attacking every turn, putting a lot of pressure on your opponents. If you like this kind of content, please let me know. I have been thinking about doing full upgrade paths for specific decks that are very popular. Please let me know in the comments below if that's something you would like to see. Also, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on this video. It really makes a world of difference to smaller creators as we are trying to grow. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody. Bye.